The safe's door hung slightly open, like an unspoken invitation. Zara stood frozen, eyes fixed on the stacks of crisp cash and glittering diamonds inside it. Was this trust? A test? Or a trap, waiting for her to make the wrong move? Morning sunlight poured through the towering glass walls of Collins' estate, but somehow, its warmth never quite reached Max Collins. He sat alone at the head of a 12-foot mahogany table, a single plate in front of him. Scrambled eggs going cold. Toast turning stiff. Coffee black as the mood that clung to him like a second shadow. His phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Emails. Stock alerts. Reminders from his assistant. He ignored every single one. Instead, his eyes drifted across the room to the vault embedded in the far wall. Steel. Polished. Always locked. A silent witness to everything his life had become. Inside sat millions, stacked in perfect, banded rows. Proof of his success. Proof of his power. Proof that after everything he'd been through, you couldn't really trust anyone. Max had learned that lesson the hard way. First, from a business partner who drained their company accounts without a second thought. Then from a fiancé who took her engagement ring and half his trust fund to start over somewhere warm and far away. Everyone had a price. Always. Across the city, Zara Williams pulled on her crisp black uniform and twisted her hair into a bun so tight it tugged at her scalp. She locked the door to her tiny apartment, leaving behind the flickering hallway light and the smell of diesel mixed with fried dough from the corner bakery. Zara worked 3 jobs. 2 part-time, 1 full-time. The full-time gig was at Collins' estate. It paid better than most, but it came with a cost. The constant feeling of being watched. Weighed. Judged. Not by cameras, but by the eyes of wealth, which could cut deeper than any lens ever could. She'd been working there for almost 2 years now. Long enough to know Max's routines. His habits. Even the exact way he set down his coffee cup with that controlled, careful precision. He wasn't cruel, but there was a wall around him. Cold. Impenetrable. And over time, she'd learned to build her own wall just as high. By the time she arrived at the estate, the sun set higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. The driveway was lined with imported maple trees, their leaves too disciplined to fall out of place. She slipped in through the service entrance. The faint scent of lemon polish and expensive cologne hit her immediately. Elena, the cook, looked up from the kitchen and gave her a tired smile. "Morning, Zara." "Morning." Elena leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile air of the house. "He's in the dining room." Zara nodded and moved past with the silent efficiency of someone who'd learned how to be invisible. In the dining room, Max glanced up briefly when she entered. Then his eyes dropped back to his phone. She went about her work without a word. Dusting shelves. Straightening picture frames. Running a cloth over the gleaming sideboard. If Max noticed the slump in her shoulders, he didn't show it. If Zara noticed his untouched breakfast, she didn't ask. They lived in this strange dance of polite detachment. She never lingered. He never pried. But today, something shifted in Max's mind. A thought formed, sharp and deliberate. Maybe a little cruel. He'd done this before. With contractors. Assistants. Even his own cousin once. Leaving something valuable within reach just to see what people would do. A private test. A small thrill in a life that had become sterile and predictable. He set his cup down. The faint clink echoed in the stillness. "Zara," he said, his voice smooth but unreadable. Her eyes flicked to his, then away. "Yes, sir? Make sure the study gets extra attention today. I'll be out for a few hours." "Yes, sir." By noon, Max was gone. The low growl of his Aston Martin faded down the driveway, and the house fell quiet again. But it wasn't peaceful. In the study, Zara pushed open the double doors and inhaled the scent of leather and cedar rising from the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. She started dusting from the top, working her way down methodically. And then she saw it. The safe. It was open. Not all the way, but just enough for light to catch on what was inside. Bundles of cash, crisp and perfect. A black velvet pouch with the unmistakable gleam of diamonds. For a moment, she couldn't move. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, each second dragging like a weight she could feel in her chest. She stepped closer. Not because she wanted the money. God, she didn't. But her stomach tightened with something sharper than temptation. This wasn't an accident. Someone like Max Collins didn't forget to lock a safe. The insult settled over her slowly. Fine, like dust. Almost invisible. Impossible to ignore. Her reflection stared back at her from the steel door. Eyes darker than usual. Mouth pressed into a hard line. She took a slow breath, reached out, and with a firm, measured motion, pushed the door shut until it clicked. Then she turned and walked away, her heart still tight in her chest. If someone you worked for tested your integrity without telling you, would you confront them, walk away, or prove them wrong in silence? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's talk about trust. Max Collins sat in his car, engine idling in the private parking garage beneath his downtown office building. Phone balanced in his palm. He wasn't checking emails. Wasn't reading market reports. He was watching. The grainy security feed from the estate played on his screen. He'd pulled up the camera in the study, a habit he'd never admit to anyone. The footage showed Zara dusting the shelves, methodical as always. Then she reached the desk. The safe sat partially open. An invitation dressed as carelessness. Max leaned forward, his thumb hovering over the screen as if he could pause the moment itself. She stopped. Looked. For just a heartbeat, he thought she might reach inside. The tiniest movement of her hand toward the opening sent something sharp through his chest. Not excitement, exactly. Something hungrier. But she didn't take anything. She just closed it. Firmly. Deliberately. No hesitation. Max sat back, exhaling slowly. But what filled his chest wasn't pride or relief. It was confusion. Her posture was straight but heavy. Her face calm but shadowed. He'd seen enough people walk away from money to know the difference between indifference and insult. Zara wasn't unaffected. She was offended. Back at the estate, Zara carried on with her work. Each movement clipped. Precise. Like she was holding herself together by sheer will, keeping herself from shattering something. She didn't linger in the study a second longer than necessary. When Max returned late that afternoon, she was in the kitchen with Elena, wiping down counters. "Afternoon," he said casually, stepping inside. "Good evening, sir," Zara replied without looking at him. Her voice was polite, but hollow. He paused. Normally, she'd at least meet his eyes when she spoke. "Everything in order today?" "Yes, sir." That was it. No small updates about the pantry. No quiet mention of the roses blooming in the garden. Things she usually said in passing. Max almost asked if she'd noticed anything unusual. But the words died before they reached his tongue. That night, in his study, he poured himself a whiskey and pulled up the footage again. Her hesitation. The way she closed the safe. That faint tightening in her jaw. It should have satisfied him. The test was passed. But instead, it gnawed at him, burrowing under his skin like something sharp and unshakable. Why did it matter so much how she felt? The next morning, their dance of detachment continued. She moved through the halls like a ghost dressed in black, her footsteps soft but deliberate. Max found himself watching her longer than usual, waiting for a crack in the mask she wore. At one point, as she polished a silver tray in the living room, he caught her reflection in the glass window. Her eyes flicked toward him briefly, then dropped again. No hostility. No warmth. Just distance. It irritated him more than he expected. Later that day, he intercepted her in the hallway outside the study. "Zara," he said, keeping his tone casual but probing. "How long have you been working here now?" "Almost 2 years, sir. And in all that time, I've never had a reason to doubt you." Her eyes met his then. And for the first time since the test, he saw the quiet storm behind them. "Good to know," she said flatly, stepping past him. The words were polite. The delivery was not. Max stood there for a long moment, the echo of her voice clinging to him like smoke. That evening, Elena found Zara in the pantry, staring blankly at rows of neatly labeled jars. "You okay?" Elena asked softly. Zara forced a smile. "Just tired." But she wasn't tired. She was disappointed. Disappointed that even after nearly 2 years of honest work, she was still just another suspect in her employer's eyes. She hadn't touched the money. Not because she feared getting caught, but because she'd promised herself long ago that desperation wouldn't dictate her morals. And yet, the sting of being tested without cause lingered like a bruise. Meanwhile, Max sat in the study, swirling the last inch of whiskey in his glass. His gaze flicked to the safe. What had he been hoping for? To catch her stealing? To prove himself right about people? Instead, all he'd done was build another wall between them. But why did that matter so much now? He set the glass down and rubbed his temples. This wasn't over. Do you think Max should admit to Zara that he left the safe open on purpose, or would that make things worse? Comment below. Your take might just shape what happens next. The next 3 days passed like a chess match where no one wanted to admit they were playing. Moves and countermoves. Avoidance dressed up as strategy. Max noticed Zara was more efficient than ever. Her work spotless. Her timing precise. Her presence nearly invisible. If she was in the same room as him, she stayed on the far side. If he entered a room, she'd find a reason to leave within minutes. It was infuriating. Not because she was failing at her job. If anything, she was performing flawlessly. But because she was treating him like a stranger. On the fourth morning, he lingered in the kitchen as she loaded the dishwasher. "You've been quiet lately," he said, leaning against the counter. "Just keeping busy," she replied without looking up. Her tone was smooth, but it had an edge. Like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Everything all right?" he pressed. "Yes, sir." The way she said it landed heavier than usual. Like she was building a wall out of formality. Max almost blurted it out right there. "I tested you. You passed. I was wrong." But the words stayed trapped behind his pride and his need for control. That evening, he sat in the study with the safe closed, locked, humming quietly in its place. He told himself he'd imagined the shift in her behavior. But the truth was harder to swallow. He had caused it. His phone buzzed. A text from his friend Trevor. "Drinks tonight? You look like you need to get out of your own head." Max almost declined. But something in him wanted distance from the estate. Distance from the heavy air Zara left in her wake. At the bar, Trevor laughed too loudly and flirted with the waitress. But Max barely heard him. His thoughts kept circling back to the image of Zara closing the safe. Her jaw tight. Her eyes shadowed. Trevor finally asked, "What's eating you? You look like you lost a bet." Max smirked faintly. "Something like that." The next morning, Elena found Zara polishing the silver again, even though it already gleamed. "You're going to rub a hole in that tray," Elena teased gently. Zara shrugged. "Better than sitting still." Elena gave her a knowing look. "You're upset with him." Zara paused, cloth in hand. "I'm not upset. Just reminded." "Of what?" "That some people will never see you for who you are. Only for what they're afraid you might be." Elena didn't push further. But her eyes softened with quiet sympathy. Later that day, Max caught Zara in the library, dusting the top shelves. "I've been thinking," he said. She didn't turn around. "About what, sir?" He hesitated. "About trust." Finally, she faced him. Her gaze steady but unreadable. "Trust is a two-way street." He nodded slowly. But before he could reply, her phone rang. A soft chime that seemed almost out of place in the quiet room. She glanced at the screen, then excused herself without another word. Max stood there, staring at the space she'd just occupied. Feeling the conversation slip away like water through his fingers. That night, lying in bed, he told himself he'd drop it. He had more important things to focus on. Investments. Property acquisitions. A meeting with the mayor next week. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her hand pressing the safe shut. Not taking. Not tempted. Just refusing. And somehow, that refusal felt like a judgment against him personally. When someone pulls away after being hurt, do you believe it's better to give them space or push for a conversation? Share your thoughts below. This is where the story could turn either way. The storm rolled in without warning. Thick clouds swallowed the late afternoon light, wind howling like it had a score to settle. By the time Zara finished vacuuming the hallway rugs, the first thunderclap rattled the estate's high windows. Elena poked her head into the hall. "Road advisories are out. Power lines down in the next county." "I'll head out before it gets worse," Zara said, untying her apron. Elena frowned. "Drive's already blocked." A maple came down across the lower bend. "Grounds crew won't be able to clear it until morning." Before Zara could reply, Max appeared at the top of the staircase, one hand resting on the polished banister. "You're staying here tonight." His tone left no room for argument. Zara's spine stiffened. "I can walk down to the main road." He gestured toward the window, where rain lashed sideways against the glass. "You'd be soaked and flattened by a tree branch before you made it 100 yards. Her lips pressed together. The protest died in her throat. She hated feeling cornered. Especially by him. Elena busied herself making dinner, leaving the two of them in a silence that felt both fragile and unyielding. The dining table was set for 3. But when Elena excused herself early, muttering something about checking the generator, Max and Zara were left alone. He cleared his throat. "Sit. You've been on your feet all day." She sat. But her posture remained perfectly straight, like she was bracing for impact. They ate in near silence. The clink of silverware loud against the rain's constant drumbeat. Halfway through, Max spoke. "You ever get tired of the quiet here?" Her eyes lifted from her plate. "I'm used to quiet." "That's not what I asked." She hesitated. "Sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's heavy." "Yeah," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Heavy is a good word for it." After dinner, the storm knocked the power out completely. Darkness swallowed the estate, broken only by the flicker of the fireplace Max lit in the study. Zara lingered in the doorway, unsure whether to retreat to the guest room or join him. He looked up from the fire. "You're welcome to sit. Safer than pacing dark hallways." She stepped inside slowly, perching on the far end of the leather sofa. The fire's crackle filled the space between them. Outside, branches scraped the windows. Wind howled through unseen cracks. "You grew up here?" she asked suddenly. Max shook his head. "No. Bought it when the company went public. It felt like proof." "Proof of what?" "That I'd made it. That I was untouchable." He smirked faintly, gaze fixed on the flames. "Turns out being untouchable just means no one gets close." Zara studied him for a moment, then looked away. "Some people like it that way. Do you?" Her laugh was quiet but humorless. "Doesn't matter what I like. You learn to live with what you're given." The fire popped, sending a small ember floating upward before it faded. Neither spoke for a while. But something in the air shifted. Still heavy, but no longer impenetrable. When a particularly loud gust rattled the windowpane, she glanced toward it, then back to him. "If this house blows away, I'm blaming you." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Just a fraction." "Fair enough." It was the smallest crack in the wall between them. But it was there. Have you ever been stuck with someone you were avoiding, and did it make things better or worse? Drop your story in the comments. I'm curious how that tension plays out in real life. The storm refused to let up. By morning, the estate grounds glistened with puddles, and branches littered the driveway like fallen matchsticks. The hum of the backup generator was the only sign of life besides the rain. Elena had driven her small SUV as far as the road allowed to meet her husband, leaving Max and Zara alone again. After breakfast, Zara gathered her cleaning supplies, determined to stay busy. But when she passed the study, Max's voice stopped her. "Zara. Come here a second." She stepped inside, wary. He was at the desk. A leather-bound photo album opens in front of him. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite. "I still have rooms to." "They'll wait." She hesitated, then sat. He turned the album toward her. Old photographs. Grainy, sun-faded images of a boy in hand-me-down clothes standing in front of a rusted trailer. "That's me," Max said quietly. She blinked, glancing between him and the boy in the picture. "I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Father drank more than he worked. Mother disappeared before I could walk. I learned early that if I wanted something, I'd have to take it myself. And if I wanted to keep it, I'd have to protect it from everyone. Because sooner or later, they'd try to take it back." His tone was matter-of-fact. But his eyes stayed fixed on the photographs, as if looking at her might make the admission too raw. Zara leaned back slightly. "That's why you don't trust anyone." "That's why I test people," he corrected. Though the word sounded hollow even to him. She let a long moment pass before speaking. "You know what I learned early?" He met her gaze, waiting. "That your word is the only thing you can't afford to lose. Money comes and goes. Jobs too. But if people stop believing your word, you've got nothing." It wasn't said with heat or anger. Just quiet conviction. And it landed heavier than any accusation. Max didn't reply immediately. He studied her, as if trying to reconcile the woman before him with the version he'd been keeping in his head. "Is that why you shut the safe?" he asked finally. Her brows rose. "I shut the safe because it wasn't mine to open. Not because I thought you'd thank me for it." The air between them tightened. But it wasn't quite hostility. It was truth. They spent the rest of the morning in the study. Him leafing through the album. Her dusting the shelves in a slower, more thoughtful rhythm. Around noon, when the rain eased to a drizzle, they moved to the kitchen. Max boiled water for tea, a rare gesture from a man who usually had everything prepared for him. He set the steaming mug in front of her. "For the record, you've given me more reason to trust you than anyone in years." She looked at him for a long moment before replying. "Then maybe stop looking for reasons not to." It wasn't a truce. Not yet. But it was the first bridge built between two very stubborn shores. If someone from your past shaped the way you trust or don't trust people now, what happened? Share if you're comfortable. Stories like that are often more relatable than we think. By late afternoon, the storm had softened to a gentle rain. The estate felt oddly peaceful. The constant hum of the generator faded into the background, replaced by the steady drip of water from the gutters outside. Zara was in the kitchen, carefully slicing bread for sandwiches when Max walked in carrying a dusty box. "What's that?" she asked. "Board games," he said with an almost sheepish shrug. "Figured we could try not sitting in separate rooms pretending we don't exist." Her brows arched. "You play board games?" "I used to," he said, setting the box on the counter. "Mostly when the power went out. Back when the only entertainment we had was candles and a deck of cards." There was something almost boyish in the way he said it. They ended up in the study with a game of Scrabble spread out between them, the fire crackling in the hearth once again. At first, the conversation was sparse. The occasional word about the tiles on the board. But slowly, something shifted. When Max placed the word wealthy across a triple word score, Zara smirked. "Shocking choice. You could challenge it," he teased. I'm more interested in making lonely intersected, she replied, laying her tiles down with quiet satisfaction. He chuckled. A sound she hadn't heard from him before. Not polite. Not measured. Just real. As the game went on, they drifted into stories. Max told her about the time he and Trevor, as teenagers, tried to borrow a neighbor's canoe and ended up sinking it in the middle of a lake. Zara laughed so hard she had to set her tiles down. I can't imagine you in a canoe. You probably wore cufflinks. I was 14, he said, grinning. I didn't own cufflinks yet. In turn, she told him about her younger sister, Zoe. How she'd worked 3 jobs to put her through nursing school. How Zoe had been the reason she never let her pride slip, no matter how bad things got. That's incredible, he said softly. You did all that for her. She's family, Zara replied simply. As though that was all the explanation needed. The rain picked up again after sunset. But inside, the air was warmer. Not from the fire, but from the ease that had settled between them. At one point, when the power flickered and the lights dimmed, Max rose to light more candles. The glow caught the sharp planes of his face, softening them in ways Zara hadn't seen before. You ever think, he said as he set a candle on the table, that maybe the people we trust the least are the ones we should give the most chance to prove us wrong? Her gaze held his for a long moment. And you ever think that if you stop testing people, you might find out they were worth trusting all along? Neither looked away first. By the time they packed up the game, the room smelled faintly of melting wax and wood smoke. It was the first time in 2 years Zara had lingered in the study after finishing her work. And the first time Max had wanted her to. And for both of them, that realization felt like the beginning of something they weren't ready to name. Do you think lighter moments are the key to rebuilding trust, or do serious conversations do more? Share your thoughts. This debate is as old as relationships themselves. The next morning brought clear skies. Sunlight streaming through the estate's high windows like a quiet promise that the storm had passed. Max found himself in the kitchen earlier than usual, brewing coffee. Zara walked in, hair slightly looser than normal, her expression calm. They exchanged a small, unspoken smile. An acknowledgement of the strange, unplanned companionship the storm had forced on them. It might have been a good day. It should have been. Until the doorbell rang. Max opened the door to find Victoria standing there. His ex-fiancée. Perfectly styled. Lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, she said, stepping inside without invitation. You still live in this museum of yours. What do you want, Victoria? Max asked, his voice cool. I was in town. Thought I'd drop by. Catch up. Her gaze drifted toward the kitchen, where Zara had just set down a tray of clean glasses. Victoria's smile sharpened. And who's this? Before Max could answer, Victoria continued, her tone dripping with condescension. I see you've diversified your staff. Very progressive of you. Zara's jaw tightened. But she said nothing. Max's stomach nodded. He should have spoken up immediately. Shut Victoria down. Made it crystal clear her words were unacceptable. But the old reflex kicked in. The need to keep situations controlled. To avoid direct conflict. It froze him for just a second too long. And in that second, Victoria's smirk deepened. I suppose someone has to dust all this wealth you hoard. Zara didn't flinch. Didn't respond. She simply placed the last glass in the cupboard, nodded politely to Max, and walked past both of them toward the service entrance. Zara, Max started. But she didn't stop. The sound of the door clicking shut behind her landed like a gunshot. Victoria laughed softly. Oh, did I interrupt something? Max turned on her. His voice low but sharp. Get out. Her smile faltered. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she shrugged and sauntered toward the door. Suit yourself. Still touchy, I see. The moment she was gone, Max's chest felt too tight. He replayed the scene in his mind. Every second of his hesitation magnified until it was unbearable. He found Zara in the staff parking area, unlocking her car. Zara, wait, he said, approaching quickly. She didn't look at him. I'm not upset about her, Max. I'm upset about you. The words landed like a slap. You didn't say anything, she continued, her voice steady but charged. You let her talk to me like that, and you said nothing. 2 days ago, you were telling me I'd given you reason to trust me. And today, you let someone treat me like I'm less than a person. His mouth opened. But no defense came out. She shook her head. I've dealt with that my whole life. I don't need it where I work. And I definitely don't need it from someone who claims to see me differently. With that, she got in her car and drove away, leaving him standing in the sunlight that suddenly felt as cold as marble. Back in the study, Max sat in silence. The safe loomed in the corner, closed and locked. But now it seemed to mock him. He had tested her once. And she had passed. Now, when he had been tested, he had failed. And he wasn't sure she'd give him another chance. If someone stayed silent when they should have defended you, could you forgive them? Or would that silence speak louder than any apology? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your take. The estate felt emptier than usual. Not just quiet. Hollow. Max sat in the study that evening, staring at the untouched glass of whiskey on the desk. Victoria's words had faded. But Zara's stayed. I'm upset about you. It wasn't anger in her voice that haunted him. It was disappointment. The kind that said he had confirmed her worst expectations. He'd spent years convincing himself that his guardedness protected him. But now he could see the truth. It had made him a coward. For the first time in a long time, he didn't try to think his way through the problem. He just felt it. The shame. The regret. The fear that this might be beyond repair. He thought of the way she'd shut the safe. The way she'd sat across from him in candlelight, teasing him over a board game. The way she'd told him to stop looking for reasons not to trust her. And then the way she'd walked away without looking back. By morning, the decision was made. Max drove to the city, his car cutting through the light fog that clung to the streets. He parked outside a modest brick apartment building. The kind where tenants hung plants in the windows and kids rode scooters on the sidewalk. He climbed the narrow stairwell to the 4th floor and knocked on the door marked 4B. It opened a crack. Zara's eyes appeared first. Cautious. What are you doing here? I came to talk, he responded. I'm not interested in excuses. Good, he said quickly. Because I don't have one. I only have the truth. And it's this. I froze. I let my pride and my old habits get in the way. I should have defended you. I should have shut her down before she finished her sentence. She studied him for a long moment. Why didn't you? Because for years, I've been afraid of conflict. Afraid that letting my guard down would make me lose something. But I realized yesterday that I lost something anyway. He swallowed. I lost you. She opened the door a little wider. But didn't invite him in. You don't know me well enough to lose me, she said softly. I know enough, he replied. Enough to know I trust you more than anyone. Enough to know I care about you. Not as an employee. Not as someone who passed my stupid test. But as someone I want in my life. Her gaze dropped for a moment, then lifted again. Words are easy, Max. He nodded. Then let me prove it. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. She didn't take it right away. Her eyes flicked to it. It's not jewelry, he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver key. What is that? The spare key to my safe, he said quietly. Because the truth is, you've had it all along. This just makes it official. Silence stretched between them. The hum of the city filtered in from the street below. Car horns. Distant voices. The rattle of the L rail. Finally, Zara reached out and took the box. This doesn't fix everything, she said. I know, he replied. But maybe it can be a start. For the first time since the storm, her expression softened. Give me time, she said. As much as you need. When she closed the door, Max didn't feel the sting of rejection. He felt the weight of a choice made. And the quiet hope that it might be the right one. If someone admits their failure and makes a real effort to change, do you think trust can fully return? Or is it never the same? Share your view. This is one of the toughest calls in any relationship. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of polite but brief conversations at work. 2 weeks of Max giving her space. No grand gestures. No forced apologies. Just quiet consistency. Zara noticed the difference. He no longer hovered near the study door when she came to clean it. He no longer locked the safe when she was in the room, even if he stepped away. He even started brewing extra coffee in the mornings, leaving a steaming mug on the counter with her name written on a sticky note. She never said thank you aloud. But she drank it every time. One Friday evening, after the last of the staff had left, Zara was gathering her things when Max appeared in the kitchen doorway. Do you have a minute? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He led her to the garden, where the last traces of sunset bled into the horizon. The air was cool, scented faintly with roses and damp earth. I wanted to show you something, he said, handing her a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it to find a letter. Formal at first, but quickly giving way to something more personal. I am sorry I made you feel small. I am sorry I hesitated when you needed me to stand tall. You have shown me more integrity than most people I've known in my life, and I would be a fool to risk losing that again. Zara read it twice, her fingers tracing the words. You wrote this? I needed you to have it in writing, he said with a small smile. In case I ever forget, you can remind me. They stood there in silence for a moment, the garden lights flickering on one by one. I'm not used to people admitting they're wrong, she said finally. I'm not used to admitting it, he replied. But for you, I'm willing to get used to it. A laugh escaped her. Soft but genuine. You're still a little full of yourself. And you're still not afraid to tell me, he said. She handed the letter back, but he shook his head. It's yours. Keep it. Her gaze held his for a long moment. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not a dramatic revelation, but the quiet certainty that the walls between them were no longer unscalable. I trust you, she said. The words were simple, but weighted. And for Max, it felt like the most valuable thing he had ever been given. They walked back toward the house together, their steps unhurried. At the back door, he paused. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. Not here. Somewhere with good food and bad lighting. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. We'll see. But when she walked away, there was no coldness in it. Just the promise that she might say yes. Inside, the study waited. The safe closed, but unlocked. The key he had given her was nowhere in sight. Yet he knew she still had it. That was enough. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a home. Do you believe love and trust can grow stronger after being tested, or is the first crack always there? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to know your perspective.